You are listening to the voice of Kurdish American Radio for democracy, peace, and freedom.
حفسيت بيا ربي خديد لي مقلك وانا حفسيت بيا ربي خديد لي مقلك وانا قلت خلي الكرمامي من الولات خريبان وخربتي قلك نخوشة وزيرا بملي بنا رايخ مكتكتين أصبالي فابد مبالة أزيرا بمكمراش بشتاق وبشكين بوهز بيقش خليل بكمنالة
My name is Amanda Sokolova at Cal State University Fullerton, and I have the esteemed privilege of introducing our presenters today. Soraya Fallah is a lifelong women and human rights activist, scholar, and a researcher of Kurdish origin. She works extensively with local and international NGOs to promote human rights in the USA and throughout the world. Organizations such as International PEN Kurdish Sector, UNA USA, San Fernando. She has chaired several international conferences in Iraq and the U.S. She has served as a delegate on violence against Kurdish women in their oppressed states to the UN for the first time in Kurdish women history in 2007. Accompanying her is Cklara Moradian, philosophy student at Cal State LA and a human rights activist. She is a Kurdish-born writer and spoken word artist. Very much. We want to welcome warmly both.
Hope you're enjoying your morning. I hope this panel gonna be both informative and inspiring. This panel is called Violence Against Women in Oppressive States. I'm here today to speak specifically about and on behalf of Kurds. The violence I will be focusing on is often not recognized, though it is very real. Oppressive states are not defined in my discussion, but rather I will be speaking in terms of conflict, both armed warfare and low-intensity warfare, because of the many borders issue of the Kurdish population. The title of our paper is The Perpetual Assault on the Kurdish Land, embodied in the perpetual rape of the Kurdish woman. This paper with a 1-minute clip from the film Turtle Can Fly by Fallah, a short segment of the documentary series Witness, People and Power, Turkey's Hidden Shame, and part of the film All My Mothers. This paper is a work in progress and a collaborative effort with my assistant writer researcher Cklara Moradian. Whenever a panel focuses on a sensitive material such as violence on women, the standard disclaimer applies. The topics I will be discussing, describing and analyzing are very graphic in nature. Some of the footage I am going to show you is also disturbing.
automatic guns, stony deserts, camouflage armies, and roadside bombs? For most they do. And if so, what other words or images follow? Maybe invasion, enemy combatants, prisoners of war, collateral damage, bombardment, casualties. When speaking of armed conflicts, all of these words are relevant. But the military-industrial complex, the machinery of war I am speaking of today, is not a material experience. It is an organic one. The war is an all-encompassing, all-embodied war, by bodies, onto bodies. Systematically, consciously, strategically, deliberately, planned out and organized, soldiers carry out monstrosities but face little or no serious repercussions. The wounds they inflict by each thrust of their attack are no less brutal, no less traumatizing, no less gruesome or bloody than the mutilation of a limb. Their weapon of choice is capable of paralyzing an entire population, breaking the most intimate bonds and cutting the sense of solidarity within a community. Their weapon of choice is capable of demoralizing and dehumanizing individuals, humiliating the innocent, leaving the battleground in a state of disoriented shock, with victims who are unable to cope with the loss of their integrity, respect, and basic human dignity. But our understanding of these soldiers and their tactics must rise above grenades and barrels of a gun. These men are not armed with sophisticated tools to butcher the womanhood, girlhood, childhood, and even boyhood. They impose and force themselves onto their victims by colonizing them physically and internally, leaving each victim in an agonizing state of naked, disarmed, and violated vulnerability. When choosing rape and sexual torture as a tactic in war, the invaders take into consideration the victim's culture, history of male supremacy, gender inequality, gender asymmetry, legacy of gendercide, the mythology about women's sexuality, and institutionalized female. In a culture like this, rape becomes more than a one-time assault. It becomes a debilitating, paralyzing plague on society. On the one hand, due to the nature of the violence itself, and on the other hand, due to the cultural association of the raped body. The deeply ingrained cultural notions of shame and honor become like explosive devices, and the omnipresence of religious iconography become air raids, bombarding guilt into the population's psyche. Cultural emphasis on the female purity lead to further victimizing the victim. This is perhaps the most significant reason sexual violence and rape is an all-encompassing, perpetual, parasitic weapon. It leaches onto the victim's flesh and sanity and has the power to destroy the body on contact and continue molding into a contagious infection of internal hatred, outward disability, deafening silence, and ultimately self-annihilating guilt. Andrea Dworkin in Feminism and Agenda writes, "We want the end of the exploitation of women, but as long as there is rape, there's not going to be any peace or justice or equality or freedom."
So I'm going to go and talk about the case of Kurdistan, the weapon of sexual assault in Iran, Iraq, and Turkey, with a brief mention of Syria. UNIFEM's website has an entire section dedicated to violence on women in situation of armed conflict, but only briefly mentions sexual violence in Palestine. Not much else is covered from the region. It has to be acknowledged that sexual violence in the Middle East, including Kurdistan, is not simply the consequences of war, but a deliberate weapon and tactic used for oppression.
بلی امنی شام بلادنا عثمانیان دا بیت خوارنام کسمام و کرمامی منکن بلی نبیشن سواری کی کرده چندی بیکار و